BS Zone. I'm Steve Gruber. I am America's voice and America First guy. Let me be clear. I'm here to tell you the truth, not make you feel good. So buckle up, kids. It's going to be a rough ride. Here are three big things you need to know right now. Number one, Donald Trump's third bid for the White House is taking a different path that will lead him through smaller venues and not the massive MAGA rallies, at least not yet. But he's still slamming Joe Biden. Number two, the beating death of a man at the hands of police in Memphis has the nation watching and weighing what happened, but more importantly, why did it happen? And number three, you may have heard this, but the Doomsday clock is winding down toward midnight. Is it something to take seriously, or is it just more fear porn trying to get us to panic, to let the fear take over our logical minds and allow the government to step in and exert more control of what happens next? The Doomsday clock is something that was dreamed up by a group of fearmongers and scientists at the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Now they say we are 90 seconds away from the apocalypse. And that is the more dire position the clock has ever been. But let's suppose for a minute that they are onto something here. I mean, after all, AOC and Greta Thunberg, among other high-achieving intellectual elites in politics and in the media, have been screaming that it's all over by 2030. And yes, they said that. But soon we'll retract such outrageous comments because, of course, predictions of the end of time, no matter which cult, or cult leaders put them out there, never come to pass. And let's be straight. Seems to me a tool. Another tool to elicit a strong reaction from a certain segment of the population. That's right, the Doomsday clock moving closer to midnight. It means not much at all, just more fear-mongering. But it seems I'm not alone either. Listen to this.
Look, it's one of those things. We ought to take this with a healthy dose of skepticism and say, it's not so much the fact that they think the clock's moving. My question is, whose agenda does it serve if they move the clock forward? I don't know that I know that we're close on some things, but to me, this is just another tactic. And you know how it works, too. This is like V for Vendetta. As long as you can instill enough fear in people, they will trust the government to take actions for them. We saw it with COVID. We saw it with other things. And now, to me, this is just another thing that says, hey, this is another way for us to control fear, which ultimately means we can control how the population reacts.
And control the way the population reacts. Control the way the population reacts. Key phrase. But there are things that are unsettling, to say the least. The worldwide economy is not in great shape. More supply chain issues are quite likely going to occur, again, because China's still getting battered like chicken with its homegrown COVID outbreaks that are hurting production there. This comes at a time when it's pretty clear that the vaccines and all the mandates and lockdowns did more harm than good. And as I told you last week, the United States has suffered 300,000 excess deaths since early 2020 that were not from COVID, but can be attributed in the majority of the cases to reactions to the COVID pandemic that impacted medical care across the nation. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is taking aim at public health officials and organizations for destroying their own credibility throughout the COVID pandemic. Listen to this.
So when you have a public health authority essentially overstate the case for the vaccines, and then this is even worse, gaslight people who have actually had vaccine injuries and make them feel like they're going crazy, just and while they're suffering through some health condition caused by the vaccine. I think it undermines trust in public health. Imagine a world where there was no vaccine mandate, no vaccine pressure. Just they told you, go see your doctor. If the doctor says you need it, then you should get it. I think then what would happen is a lot of older people would have got the vaccine. We'd have prevented a lot of severe disease and death, and we would still have confidence in public health.
And despite the obvious failures of the mRNA jabs, including the harm done to many people by the injections, the steady push continues from many corners to go back to some of those draconian rules and regulations and lockdowns. I can assure you, I'll not be among those allowing any further experimentation with my body or my health. From watching the Doomsday clock, you certainly have to look at the military buildup in China. I'm not sure if all the things I'm going to touch on are considered by the folks moving the clock, but they should be if they're not. The Chinese military buildup and the creation of new military bases and new places globally creates an atmosphere of military escalation. Speaking of which, so does sending U.S. and German tanks to fight Russia on the ground in Ukraine, because to me, that's an outright declaration of war by the U.S. against Vladimir Putin and Russia, and I say, why? Have we not learned our lesson in America? Have we not? What on earth did we miss with our follies in Iraq and Afghanistan? The warmongers are on both sides of the aisle, by the way. And I'm just not in support of the delivery of heavy tanks to Ukraine to fight Russia, not from America, not from the UK, not from Germany, not from any of them. But some people are all for it, like Vindman. Listen to this.
A lot of wins, but frankly, a lot of shortfalls in terms of fully supporting Ukraine to win this war and defeat Russia in its efforts to achieve political aims through military force. I think all these things should have been flowing in a long time ago. Training should have been occurring months ago on these systems, on planes, on everything that Ukrainian military needs to liberate its territory. This is all foreseeable. In fact, I had this exact conversation with the White House in the days before and after the war, that they would have to do things that they would think unbelievable and cross all sorts of red lines and provide Ukraine support. And it's just taken about a year to get there. But I'm glad that I'm glad the Germans are sending their tanks and other European capitals that have Leopard 2 tanks are sending them in much more quickly.
Vindman, remember him? From the impeachment trials of Donald Trump. I met with Donald Trump in the Oval Office November the 19th, 2019. One of the times that I interviewed the president. That was the day that guy, Alex Vindman, was on the stand. I think his name's Alex. Doesn't matter. And on this one, I do stand with President Donald Trump. I don't think America has any business being as deeply involved in the war as we already are. And that so many in Washington want. They want us in far deeper. And on the campaign trail, the former president said we would never be in Ukraine because the war would not have happened had he been in charge, which I happen to believe, by the way, wholeheartedly. Here's one of his comments. Listen.
My personality kept us out of war. And I told you before, would have never happened with Russia, would have never gone in, Putin would have never, ever gone in. And even now, I could solve that in 24 hours. It's so horrible what happened. I mean, those cities are demolished now. The people, I'll bet you have millions. It could be millions of people. How can they bomb a city to the ground. These big buildings come tumbling down. They say 2 people were injured. Not 2 people. They lie. I mean.
Yeah, they lie all the time. That's what they do. They lie. But the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned us about, among other things, I'm going to dig deeper into that speech this week as well. He was exactly right. He was spot on. He was a seer at that point. A man who had been on the beaches of Normandy, who had led the D-Day attacks, knew that the people building military equipment were too powerful. He knew the government funding research was dangerous to the research itself. He knew that mortgaging our future and our grandchildren's future to pay for what we needed or wanted today was dangerous. I will continue that study of Eisenhower this week on the program. You'll want to see all of that. When I continue, though, the Doomsday Clock and other things to consider right now that are going on in this country. Doomsday Clock? Yeah, a little bit over the top. But everything else, worth considering. It's the Steve Gruber Show.